So here is something that should not have been possible. A woman who was not on the guest list walked into a secured hall in Westminster on a wet Tuesday afternoon, crossed 40 feet of floor in front of 24 reporters, and said something to the Princess of Wales that made the entire room stop talking at once. And the person who ended it was not security. It was a 76-year-old woman in a navy coat who had been standing 4 feet away looking at a display of local potatoes. Now, I am going to hold the words themselves for a few minutes, because the words matter far less than the two things sitting underneath them. And one of those things is a photographer who was in exactly the right place before anybody had moved. Stay with me. This one was arranged. If you like the ones where the quiet person turns out to have been counting the whole time, take a second and subscribe. Because what happened after that hall emptied is considerably worse for one family than what happened inside it. Quick word before we go further. I'm Harold. I spend my time going through the guest lists, the access logs, the accreditation records, and the small print that moves around this family, the paperwork that gets filed on a Tuesday and explains everything by Thursday if anybody bothers to look at it. And what you are about to hear is me putting the pieces together the way I read them. Stay with me to the end, because the last document in this story is the one that ends a family's place in that institution. By the time we finish, you will know what was said in that hall. You will know who put that woman's name on the list. You will know what Anne did in the back of a car on the way home that nobody has reported anywhere, and you will know why a king signed a page on a Monday morning without lifting his head. Let me take you into the room, the Royal Horticultural Halls in Westminster. A charity showcase for rural development, which is about as far from a scandal as an afternoon can get. Trestle tables, county producers, jars of honey with handwritten labels, a man from Cumbria standing behind a display of seed potatoes waiting for his 90 seconds. Anne was working the room the way she has worked rooms for 50 years. Structured navy coat, gold brooch, a tight schedule, a list of local dignitaries she goes through methodically without ever once looking like she wants to be somewhere else. That woman has done more official engagements than anybody else in that family every year for most of my adult life, and in 5 decades of it there has not been a single complaint about her conduct at one. Catherine was there too, on the same visit, 2 stands further down. That detail matters, and I want you to hold it, because the presence of the Princess of Wales at a small agricultural showcase in June is not a coincidence of the diary. Quick note before we continue, everything I dig up that doesn't make it into these videos I put into a free weekly letter. Join more than 10,000 royal insiders at crownletter.com. The link is in the pinned comment below. If you're watching on your TV, just point your phone at the QR code on screen. It is a decision made weeks in advance by somebody who wanted a photograph of the two of them together, the senior woman and the future queen, working the same room. There is a message in that image, and everybody inside the palace understood what it was. And there is a reason a photograph of those two women together carries weight that a photograph of either of them alone does not. This family has spent 29 years being measured against one absent woman, and the only answer it has ever found to that comparison is continuity. An older woman who has never put a foot wrong beside a younger one the country has decided it trusts. Diana's shadow is the reason that image exists at all, and everybody who books these engagements knows it even if nobody says it. Somebody outside the palace understood it too. The reporters were the usual small pool, 2 regional papers, a wire photographer, 1 broadcast crew doing pictures without sound, and 1 freelance with a long lens, standing at the back, on the diagonal, in the only position in that hall from which you can see the faces of 2 people standing at the 3rd stand along. He had been there since the doors opened. Hold that. I will come back to him, and it will not be pleasant. At about 2:20, Laura Lopes came in through a side entrance. Camilla's daughter. Married name Lopes, 2 children, a career in the art world, a woman who has spent her entire adult life being photographed twice a year and otherwise leaving no trace at all. Nobody in that hall was expecting her, because she wasn't on the working list for the afternoon session. and had no business being anywhere near a restricted floor. She came through the crowd without stopping, which is the part that tells you she knew exactly where she was going, and she stopped about 6 feet behind Catherine. She waited for a gap in the conversation. She got one, and then she stepped forward. No curtsy, no greeting, no dropping of the voice, which is what everybody does automatically in a room like that, even when they are furious, because the acoustics under a glass roof carry a whisper 20 feet. 4 separate people were close enough to hear it. She told her that the recent changes to the estate funding had been a deliberate insult to her family, and that everybody involved knew exactly what they were doing. She said it to Catherine. Now stop and look at what that is, because the coverage has spent a week calling it an outburst, and it was nothing of the kind. An outburst happens in a corridor, an outburst happens in a car park, or at the end of a lunch, or in a doorway when 2 people meet by accident and one of them has had enough. An outburst does not require a side entrance, a name added to a restricted list, and a photographer standing on the diagonal at the back of the hall since 1:10. A woman who was barred from that guest list walked into a public engagement and raised a private family money grievance in front of the press. That is not temper. That is a delivery. Catherine did not answer her. Everybody has been very clear about that, and having watched 14 years of that woman in public, it would have astonished me if she had. She has never once in her life given a room what it came for. She took half a step back, kept her face completely still, and looked at the woman in front of her the way you look at a person who has done something they cannot take back. The man from Cumbria was still holding a potato, and then 4 feet to the left, Anne turned round. She did not turn straight away, which is the detail every single witness has mentioned, and it is the reason this story exists at all. She adjusted her gloves first. One, then the other, pulling the cuff down at the wrist the way she has done in 10,000 photographs. Then she stood completely still for about 3 seconds. 3 seconds is a very long time in a room with 200 people in it. Long enough for the conversation at the far end to die out on its own. Long enough for a broadcast operator to swing a camera round without being told. Somebody has said you could hear the rain hitting the glass roof, and I believe it, because that is exactly what a hall like that sounds like, when everybody in it stops talking at the same moment. Then she turned and faced the woman. No anger in it. That is the thing people find hard to believe, and it is the thing that made it work. Her expression did not change at all, and she did not answer the accusation. That is the move, and it is worth slowing down on, because it is the most surgical thing anybody has done in public in that family in 20 years. Laura had come into that hall with a grievance about money and estates and family treatment, and every syllable of it was designed to be answered, because an answer makes it a dispute, and a dispute has 2 sides, and 2 sides can be reported. Anne did not give her a side. She asked in a perfectly ordinary voice whether the security team had checked the guest list for the afternoon session. That was the whole reply. Not a word about the funding, not a word about the family, or the estates, or the insult. One question, to the room rather than to the woman, about whether that person was supposed to be standing there at all. She did not argue with what Laura said. She queried her right to be in the building. I have watched that clip more times than is healthy, and it still makes me wince. Anybody can lose an argument. Being told in front of the national press that the real question is how you got past the door is a different order of thing entirely, and it does not wash off. And this is the point where Laura made her second mistake, which was much larger than the first. She should have gone. Any advisor in that building would have told her to smile, apologize for the intrusion, and walk out through the side door she came in by. And by Thursday it would have been a paragraph. She stepped closer instead. Witnesses have described her as having gone very red by that stage. She told the Princess Royal that she was hiding behind outdated protocol. She said the financial audit currently running across the estates was being driven deliberately to damage her family. And she said that everybody in that palace knew about the private meetings that had been taking place with the Prince of Wales. That last one carried across the polished floor to the back of the hall, which is where the reporters were standing, and 3 of them went for their notebooks at the same time. Let me explain the audit quickly, because everything in this story hangs off it and it takes 20 seconds. A royal estate audit has nothing to do with anybody's handbag. It is a line-by-line reconciliation of what an estate spent against what it was authorized to spend, running back years, and it catches 2 things. Money that went out with no paperwork behind it, and people who were being paid for work nobody can produce evidence of. The consequence is the part that matters. An audit does not accuse anybody of anything. It produces a list of items that require an explanation, and then it becomes somebody's job to explain them. Somebody in that family had been told to expect that list, and the shutter had been going the entire time. That freelance at the back with the long lens had been firing since the moment Laura stepped forward, and in a hall with a glass roof and a stone floor, the sound of a professional body at 8 frames a second is not subtle. 2 people standing near him have said the same thing. He did not move position once. He did not swing round to find the shot. He was already on it. A photographer does not get that lucky. A photographer gets told. Anne did not raise her voice at any point. She lifted one hand about 6 inches, which is the signal her protection officer has been reading for 30 years, and the man came through the crowd without hurrying, and asked Laura to step out to the lobby and told her that her presence at the event was no longer appropriate. The entire thing, from the first sentence to the doors, ran under 2 minutes. 2 minutes. And it took a fortnight of institutional machinery to deal with. Because here is what everybody in that room understood by the time they got to their cars, and what the palace understood by about 4 o'clock that afternoon. That was not a family argument that happened to occur in public. That was a family argument staged in public in front of a photographer who was booked at an event where the 2 most protected women in that institution were standing 8 feet apart, on the exact week that an audit was moving into the part where somebody would have to start explaining things. And the first question that went round the corridors of that palace was not about the words at all. It was how she got in. Security at the front of that building was tight. Accredited list, printed badges, a checkpoint at the main entrance staffed by people who turn away peers of the realm without blinking if the name is not on the sheet. The staff went to the access logs that evening, and what they found there took about 11 minutes. A VIP invitation had been issued locally, not by the palace, not by the household, not through any of the 4 officers that are supposed to sign off attendance at an event with 2 working royals in the room. It came from the regional director of the organization hosting the showcase, a quiet man in his 60s with a long connection to that part of the country, and a distant social acquaintance with Camilla's family going back years. He had been asked, late, as a favor, to add 1 more name to the restricted list by hand. He was suspended before nightfall. The invitation was logged as a Tier 1 accreditation breach, which in that world is the most serious category there is. The one reserved for a failure that put a protected person in a room with somebody nobody had checked. And in the middle of all of that, on a conference call somewhere else entirely, the Prince of Wales was told what had happened. He ended the call mid-sentence. The people on the other end of it have described that, and it is the single most out-of-character thing that man has done in public life. He doesn't do that. He is the most procedurally polite person in that institution, a man who thanks a room before he leaves it even when the room has wasted an hour of his time. And I want you to understand what he was looking at on that screen, because it was not a security lapse. He was watching a woman get approached in public, in front of a booked photographer, by somebody connected to a family with a grievance, on a week when the press had been quietly primed. He has seen that exact sequence run before, on Diana, across most of his childhood, and it finished the way it finished. He put the phone down, told his chief of staff to get the raw, unedited footage from the freelance, and made it clear that the price did not matter. Not the pictures that had already gone out. The raw card. Everything before and after the frames that were going to run, because what happens in the 90 seconds before a person steps forward tells you whether they were walking or whether they were waiting. And that instruction tells you what he was doing, which was not damage control. A man handling a public relations problem asks for the published images and a line to give the press. A man who asks for the unedited card is building a file. He watched it in his office with the lights off. The people who are in that building have described the atmosphere in one word, and the word is cold. Not shouting, not doors. Cold. He sat and watched a woman cross a hall toward his wife, and he watched the crowd react, and he watched the exact moment his aunt turned round, and when it finished, he did not say anything for a while. Then he picked up the secure line to his father. He did not ask permission. That is the part that matters, and everybody in both households noticed it. He briefed the king on what had happened, on how she had got in, on what it was going to look like in the morning papers, and then he told him that he was taking the disciplinary process himself. The king listened. He did not argue. He told his son to do whatever was necessary to protect the institution. And I want to sit on that exchange for a second, because there is a whole reign inside it. A man in his late 70s, unwell, married to a woman whose daughter had walked into a public engagement and gone at his son's wife, handing his son the authority to deal with it and staying out of the room. He did not defend anybody. He did not ask for time. He knew exactly what he had been handed, and he handed it straight on. William went into the basement briefing room at 5 without taking his coat off. 5 senior aides were already sitting there, each with a folder in front of them containing a version of the day written from whichever direction they had watched it. He walked to the middle of the mahogany table, put his phone down on it hard enough to be heard, and picked up the remote. He played the raw footage on the wall. Nobody said a word while it ran. The shutter is audible on the raw audio, which is the detail that finished the argument before anybody made it, and the sound of a professional camera firing at 8 frames a second in a silent hall filled that briefing room for about 40 seconds. He turned the projector off. Then he asked the only question he had come there to ask, which was how a woman who had been kept off the working lists for the better part of a year had walked into a secured hall containing 2 working royals. He looked at the director of security while he asked it. The man began an explanation. William stopped him about 6 words in and said he did not want an explanation, he wanted a name. He wanted the person who had made it possible identified in that room that evening, and he wanted them out of their post, off the premises, and reminded in writing of what they had signed before the first edition landed. And this is where it stops being about one afternoon in Westminster, because that is not how a man behaves about a security lapse at a flower show. He had spent the previous 2 months quietly working through the households, moving people out of positions, closing off the informal channels that have run through that building for 20 years. Everybody senior in that palace knew it was happening, and most of them had decided to keep their heads down until it was finished. That afternoon told him it was not finished, and that whatever he had been clearing out still had a hand on a door. One of the aides tried to place the blame at a distance. The invitation had come from a regional branch, he said, an outside organization, not the household. William asked him whether that branch had been briefed on the standing arrangements regarding Camilla's family. The aide nodded because it had. He asked why the briefing had been ignored. The man moved in his chair and said there had been pressure from above. William asked for a name, and the room went quiet, and nobody in it said anything at all. Then he reached for a folder that had been sitting on the table since before he came in. Red tag, restricted circulation, and a title on the front that tells you more about the state of that institution than anything else in this story. Internal influences. Somebody in that building keeps a list of the informal relationships that cut across the official structure. Marriages, old jobs, cousins. A junior manager in one office related to a senior assistant in another. It is not a scandal document. Every large organization has a version of it. And in that one, it exists because the official chart has never once described how anything gets done. It took him under a minute to find the connection. A mid-level manager in the palace administration, married to a personal assistant working inside Camilla's household. He closed the folder, looked at the director of security, and said one sentence. Within 20 minutes, the man was walking out through the back gates with 2 officers beside him, carrying nothing, at 5:30 in the afternoon, past people he had worked with for 11 years. And the message went round that building faster than any memo has ever travelled in it. The Prince of Wales had stopped being the heir who would deal with all of this eventually. He was dealing with it now. While all of that was happening in a basement in London, Anne was sitting in the back of a car. She did not use her phone. She did not speak to her aide. She sat with her hands folded on her bag and looked straight ahead through most of the drive, and the person in that car with her has said she was not upset in any way that showed. She was going back through it. The timing of the entry, the gap in the conversation the woman had waited for, the exact wording she had used and the order she had used it in, the position of the cameras when it started. Protocol is not manners to that woman. Protocol is the load-bearing wall of the entire building. Every rule about who stands where and who is on which list exists, because 200 years ago somebody worked out that the only thing separating a monarchy from a permanent argument is a written order of precedence that nobody is allowed to improvise around. She finally spoke, and it was to ask about the regional director who had issued the invitation. Not about Laura, not about her mother, about the man at the door. Security starts at the front entrance, she said, and that was the entire comment. Now there is a question underneath all of this that took me 2 days to work out, and once I saw it, I could not unsee it. Anne could have stopped that confrontation in about 4 seconds. She has a protection officer standing 8 feet away at all times. She has 50 years of authority in a room, or one raised hand at the first sentence, and that woman is in the lobby before the second one leaves her mouth, and nobody in the press pool gets more than a blurred frame and a rumour. She let it run. She stood there and let a woman say 3 full sentences in front of 24 reporters, and only moved when the last of them was out. This is my reading rather than anybody's confirmed account, and I will say that once and then get out of the way. I do not think she froze, and I do not think she was gathering herself. I think she wanted to hear the whole thing in public with witnesses and a recording running, because a grievance shouted in a corridor is deniable, and a grievance delivered in front of the national press is evidence of a state of mind. She let the woman finish building the case against herself. And then in the car she asked her aide for the attendance list, not the accredited press list. The full attendance list for the afternoon session, the one that includes local guests and organizational invitations, printed out on the way back because the aide had it on a tablet. There were 3 names on it that she recognized immediately. 3 regional journalists, none of them from the main royal pool, all 3 of them with a long and friendly relationship with people around Camilla's family, and all 3 of them standing in a hall in Westminster on a Tuesday afternoon for a rural development showcase that would normally be covered by one wire photographer and a stringer. That is the moment it stopped being an incident. 3 friendly journalists, 1 freelance on the diagonal with a long lens, 1 name added to a restricted list by hand at the last minute, and a woman who walked in through a side door and went directly to the 3rd stand along. None of that is temper. All of it is a schedule. And Anne had been the target of the thing that produced it for months. She had blocked 2 attempts to change the management rules on estate properties. She had insisted on a full audit rather than the light review that had been proposed. Every time somebody in that orbit had tried to loosen a rule about how the land is run and who benefits from it, the same woman had been standing in the corridor with the original documents in her hand. People who spend years trying to move a wall eventually decide to move the person leaning against it instead. By the time the car reached London, she had moved on to the part that mattered most, and this is the part nobody has reported anywhere. The audit was confidential, not discreet. Confidential, in the specific institutional sense, which means the number of people who knew it existed was 4, and she could name all 4 of them. And a woman had walked into a public hall that afternoon and referred to it out loud in front of reporters. Somebody had told that family it was coming. She sat in the back of that car and worked through the timeline, who had known what and on which day. and she came out of it with an answer she did not like at all, which is that the most likely route ran through her brother's own office. She made one telephone call before she got out of the car. An old contact, a person she has known for decades from a world that does not appear in any court circular, and the request was narrow and specific. A trace on the encrypted correspondence relating to the audit, not the contents, the routing. She wanted to know which building the information had left from. The car came into the courtyard at about 6:45, and she noticed the light on in her nephew's office on the way past. She did not go up. He was doing his half and she was doing hers, and neither of them needed a meeting to work out that they were pulling on the same thread from opposite ends. She went to her own desk and opened the estate management file. And she spent the rest of that evening doing the least dramatic thing anybody does in this entire story, which is checking signatures, not for money, for names, sign-offs on appointments, recommendations, and the people who made them. Junior positions in estate offices filled across 4 years by people whose route into the job ran back through the same handful of relationships. By about 11 o'clock, she was looking at a pattern, and the pattern was not a series of favors. It was a slow, patient, entirely legal placement of staff into the parts of an institution that decide how land is run and who gets paid for running it. Not a title, not a house, not an invitation to a Christmas lunch, the machinery itself. And that is the point at which the Princess Royal decided to stop blocking things and start collecting them. William's people found their own piece of it 2 days later, and theirs was uglier. A pattern of encrypted calls between Camilla's mobile and a commercial law firm in the city. Not a family solicitor, not the household's usual people. A firm that does one thing, which is defending large amounts of money when somebody official starts asking questions about it, and the dates lined up with the audit, not after it became public. Alongside it, week by week, from the point the reconciliation moved into the part that produces a list of items requiring an explanation. He asked his legal advisor whether there was any route to freezing the accounts under review before the firm could get in front of it. The advisor was honest with him, which is more than most people in that building manage. It would be very difficult. The money was not sitting in an account with a name on it. It was inside a structure of trusts and holding arrangements that the palace has no authority over whatsoever, and unpicking that takes years in a court. William stood in front of the wall map of the estate properties currently under review and gave one instruction. Every land title on that board to be checked for charges, debts, and encumbrances that nobody in the household had approved. Nobody in the room asked why. They all knew why. A property with a charge on it that nobody authorized is a property somebody has borrowed against, and that is the one thing in this entire story that would have been impossible to explain away. Then he told his team what the next 48 hours looked like. Total containment. Nothing to the press, on the record, or off it. No briefing, no steer, no friendly word to a correspondent at a drinks thing. Anybody who spoke to a journalist about any part of it, including privately, including in a way they thought was harmless, would be dealt with under the agreement they had signed on the day they took the job. He was not protecting the story from the public. He had a folder to finish, and he needed 2 days. And then he rang his father a second time, and this call was shorter than the first. He told the king that the situation at the hall was contained, that the disciplinary work inside the household was nearly complete, and that he needed one thing signed. A formal instruction removing Camilla's family from every part of the institution's business. Not a public statement. An internal decree. Dated, sealed, distributed to every household office that has ever issued an invitation or processed a payment. The king agreed. He had watched the footage by then. Everybody around him has said the same thing about that afternoon, that the disrespect landed on him harder than the money ever did, because he had spent 20 years asking that institution to accept his wife's family and had been given exactly one thing in return, which was the expectation that they would behave. While all of that was moving in London, Laura Lopes was sitting in a room with half-packed boxes in it. She had the news open on a screen in front of her, and she had been reading the comments, which is the single worst thing anybody in that position can do, and which every single one of them does. 4 million interactions inside a day. Not 4 million people, but 4 million individual acts of clicking on a thing, and the overwhelming majority of them saying one version of the same sentence about a woman who had walked up to the Princess of Wales in a hall full of cameras. She had gone in to defend her mother. There is no version of this where that is not true, and I want to give her that much, because whatever was arranged around her, the anger in that hall was real, and it came from somewhere real. And she was sitting in a room watching a country take her apart for it. Her brother came in looking grey and told her the second thing. Their personal banking had been flagged for review. Not seized, not frozen, not anything with a legal word attached to it. An automated message from a compliance department asking for documentation on transfers above £5,000, which is the letter every bank in this country sends when a name enters a category, and which arrives with nobody's signature on it, and no way of ringing anybody about it. The audit had reached past the estates and into their own accounts, and on the table beside the boxes was the notice giving them until the end of the week to vacate the estate offices. That is the humiliation scene in this story, and there is nobody in the frame doing it to them. A woman sitting on a floor among cardboard boxes with a phone in her hand, a brother standing in the doorway with a letter from a bank, and a notice on a table telling them which day to be out by. Nobody shouted at them. Nobody had to. And the question Laura kept coming back to, according to everything I have been able to establish about that week, was not about William at all. It was about her mother. Her mother was nowhere, because Camilla had gone completely silent. No call, no arrangement, no quiet word placed with somebody who could make part of it stop, which is the thing that woman has been able to do inside that institution for 20 years and has done more times than anybody outside it will ever know. Think about what silence costs that woman. She has spent 30 years being the person in that family who fixes things quietly, and she has done it for her husband, for her friends, and more than once for people who spent the 90s briefing against her. The 1 week her own daughter needed it, nothing moved. She had disappeared into her own house and stayed there. The answer arrived on the Thursday in the back of a black car. A courier, a sealed package, and inside it a letter from Camilla's own lawyer. Not a note from a mother. Formal legal advice addressed to both of them, running to less than a page. Say nothing. To anybody. No statement, no interview, no post, no comment to a friend who might repeat it. Any public act from either of them would sever their connection to the estate permanently and immediately. And that letter has been read one way by everybody who has heard about it, which is as a mother cutting her children loose to save herself. I do not think that is what it was. The audit had produced a list. That list included transfers that nobody had yet been able to produce a justification for, and while an unexplained transfer is not a crime, and I am not going to pretend otherwise, a family standing in public making statements about their own finances while that list exists is a family walking toward a room nobody wants to be in. That letter was not abandonment. It was a woman with 30 years of experience of that machine doing the only thing left that could still protect them, which was making them invisible. Laura tried to ring the firm that handles the trust arrangements that afternoon. The line was dead. The number had been disconnected. She sat there with the phone in her hand and understood, about 4 days later than everybody else, exactly how far the Prince of Wales had already gone. The following Monday, in the Privy Council chamber at Buckingham Palace, 2 men stood at opposite ends of a long table with the morning coming in flat across the stone floor. No advisors, no note-taker, nobody in the room whose job it would be to remember it afterwards. William put a single document on the table and slid it the length of it to his father. The wording ran to 1 paragraph, and it did 3 things. It revoked the official standing of Camilla's family members with immediate effect. It closed their access to invitations to any engagement, function, or ceremony of the household. And it ended every payment, arrangement, and association running to any of them from any estate account. an institution protecting itself from the people inside it. The king put one finger on the seal and traced the edge of it, which is a thing he does, and then he signed without lifting his head. Now, I promised you at the start that I would tell you what Anne did, and this is the part of it that nobody has reported. Her brother had a version of that page in front of him 3 days before the Monday, and he had not signed it. He had asked for a few days. He had asked whether it needed to go quite that far. He had done what he has done at every difficult moment of his adult life, which is look for the version of the decision that hurts the fewest people in the room he is standing in. And on the Friday evening, his sister came to see him on her own. Everybody who knows both of them says the same thing about what happened in that room, and it is the only moment in this entire story where that woman's control came off. She put one hand flat on the table. She did not raise her voice, because she has never raised her voice in her life, but she said one sentence to the King of the United Kingdom about what had been done in a public hall in Westminster to a woman who has spent the last 2 years getting herself back onto her feet in front of the entire country, and about what it meant that a family had chosen that woman at that event, on that week, to make a point about money. Everybody in that corridor heard the tone even without the words. That is the fury, and it lasted about 4 seconds, and it is the reason a page got signed on Monday morning instead of sitting in a drawer until the autumn. She has not mentioned it since to anybody. There is a thread running under all of this that goes back a long way, and it is the reason a woman in her 70s went at her own brother over a photograph of somebody else's wife. Anne watched what this family did to Diana. She watched a young woman get managed, briefed against, corrected, arranged around and quietly reduced by people who were perfectly polite about all of it, and she watched what it cost. She said almost nothing at the time, because she is not built to say things at the time. She has spent the 29 years since making absolutely certain that she is standing in the corridor when it starts again. Catherine stood in a hall in Westminster in June and had a woman walk up to her in front of 24 reporters, and the person who moved was the one who has seen it before. The decree went out to Camilla's country house by messenger on the Monday afternoon. Everybody in that building expected a telephone call. A furious one, probably, or at least a request for a meeting, a lawyer's letter, an argument about process, something. The afternoon went by. Nothing. The king's phone stayed silent all day. There is a version of that afternoon that would have made a very good photograph. A furious woman at a door, a raised voice, a car leaving at speed. Every part of that would have cost her something, and she has known it since 1997, when she watched a country decide what it thought of her from about 4 pictures and never fully change its mind afterwards. The messenger came back with an empty envelope and one line to report, which is that she had signed the receipt without a word and closed the door. Somebody left a comment under one of my videos a while ago that has stayed with me since, and it belongs here more than anywhere I have ever put it. They wrote that in that family the dangerous ones are never the ones who shout, they are the ones who accept things immediately. I read that at the time and thought it was a nice line. Then I watched a woman sign for her own family's removal from an institution without asking a single question, and I stopped thinking it was a nice line. Because that is not surrender. A woman who intends to fight asks for a meeting. A woman who intends to argue instructs a solicitor. A woman who signs a receipt and shuts a door has already worked out that there is nothing available in the next 6 months and has moved her thinking somewhere further out. William stood at a window in that palace on the Monday evening, looking down into a courtyard. And by every account of that day, he did not look like a man who had won anything. He had the outcome. He had the signature, the removals, the closed accounts, the empty offices. He had 2 months of work finished in 9 days because somebody made the single worst tactical decision available to them in a hall full of cameras. And the other side of the board had gone quiet, which is the one thing you never want from a player who has been in that game for 30 years. Tell me below what you make of that silence, because I have gone round and round on it, and I still cannot decide whether it was defeat or preparation. And subscribe if you want the rest of these. because the audit list has not finished being explained to anybody yet. Laura Lopes walked into that hall to defend her mother, and she was the only person in the entire story who paid for it out of her own life. The boxes, the bank letter, the 4 million comments, all of it landed on the daughter. And her mother, who has spent 20 years knowing exactly which telephone call stops exactly which thing. Made none of them, signed for the envelope without a word, and went back inside her own house to protect the only position in this family that has ever really mattered to her, which is her own. If you'd like more of this, I write a free letter every week. Join more than 10,000 royal insiders at crownletter.com. The link's in the pinned comment. If you're watching on your TV, just point your phone at the QR code on screen and I'll see you there.